The latest IPCC report confirmed that climate change, including more frequent and intense extreme events, has caused widespread adverse impacts and related losses and damages to nature and people. As a result, millions of people are more vulnerable as well as hungry. At the same time, conflicts are driving further consistent increases in humanitarian needs and budgets. This is an unsustainable pattern. A strategic shift from responding to predictable shocks to anticipating their impacts has the potential to break the cycle of growing dependence on humanitarian aid. This approach, commonly known as anticipatory action, establishes risk monitoring systems linked to flexible finance in order to protect people's lives and livelihoods ahead of forecast shocks. Since 2015, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, FAO, has been systematically investing in anticipatory action, in close coordination with other pioneering organizations and governments. As of today, FAO, together with governments and implementing partners, have implemented more than 30 anticipatory action projects in more than 20 countries, protecting the livelihoods of many vulnerable families ahead of shocks. Afghanistan has been one of the core countries of FAO's focus. Evidence shows that anticipating crises can curb food insecurity of vulnerable communities while providing a more efficient and more dignified kind of assistance. And these are just the short-term gains. People who face shocks often resort to negative coping strategies, such as selling their animals and land, or migrating, which have long-term consequences on their lives. The benefits of acting ahead of shocks reach far into the future and are part of the wider disaster risk management efforts. Overall, an anticipatory mindset is about acting based on risk and vulnerability rather than fully materialized humanitarian needs. Thanks to the ever-growing body of evidence on its effectiveness in preventing human suffering and reducing humanitarian needs at lower costs, anticipatory action has gained significant political momentum. Various UN resolutions, the G7 Famine Prevention and Humanitarian Crisis Compact, to name a few, all call to scale up anticipatory action. At the high-level event on anticipatory action in September 2021, co-hosted by the United Nations, Germany, and the UK, more than 75 governments and 60 organizations, international financial institutions, and private sector companies committed to acting early, and many donors made new pledges to support anticipatory action. Yet, anticipatory finance still represents a minimum share of total humanitarian finance. Some studies point to less than 3% of humanitarian financing to be prearranged and available when warnings materialize. More commitments are needed from all parties, governments, development, and humanitarian partners. Funding to scale up anticipatory action should be allocated to all the key steps required for mainstreaming this approach at national and subnational level, including the establishment of actionable early warning systems, strengthening of analytical and operational capacities, as well as flexible financial resources for implementation, including via social protection systems. This session aims to showcase a new body of evidence for anticipatory action and to raise awareness on the food security situation in Afghanistan. It will explore the efficacy of anticipatory action to mitigate and address the negative effects of drought before its peak. It will do this by answering three key questions. A, what happened in the 2020-2021 drought in Afghanistan? B, what did FAO and partners do in response to the impending drought? And C, what can we learn from this experience?
Thanks so much, Nicolo, for those three questions. And hi, everyone. My name is Catherine Jones. I am the Anticipatory Action Lead for Asia and Pacific for FAO's regional office in Bangkok. And I'll answer those three questions that Nicolo posed to us just now. So moving forward, and what happened in regards to drought in Afghanistan in 2020 and 2021? Well, in the second half of 2020, a moderate to strong La Niña phenomenon was registered with predictions that it could cause extreme weather conditions in various parts of the world. In Afghanistan, this phenomenon commonly increases the probability of below average rainfall and snowfall across the country. These effects usually coincide with the main winter wheat production season, with harvests that span from May to July. These are critical for food security and to break the lean season. In November and December 2020, the early warning signs were starting to become clear. We saw observations of low snowpack, forecast of below average rainfall, high temperatures, deteriorating soil moisture conditions, along with a La Niña declaration gave us enough evidence for action. Instead of waiting for the worst to materialize, FAO started planning 8 months before the drought emergency was declared in June 2021. The team implemented a range of anticipatory actions to mitigate the impact of the upcoming drought on 5,500 farming and livestock keeping households. These activities included crop and livestock protection packages, cash for work, and animal health support, among others. The core aim of these activities was to protect and mitigate the impact of the potential drought and shift away from us just waiting for the worst to come to fruition. They were geared towards keeping animals alive and healthy so they could continue to breed and produce critical milk and meat stocks into the spring and summer seasons. The actions further provided protection gears for vegetable and fruit crops, a vital economic lifeline for many rural families who depend on this for their income as the winter months pass. So what did we learn from this critical experience? Well, in a nutshell, we can act early and we can protect livelihoods from drought events in Afghanistan. It is possible to use early warning information to predict and implement actions ahead of a shock. We know investments into early warnings for drought and other extreme weather events in Afghanistan is critical as we move forward. Over the past 36 years, for instance, 8 out of 11 droughts were associated with La Niña, making it a 72% chance that drought will occur when this event is declared. The funding and delivery of anticipatory action came at a critical time to prevent a full-blown disaster for vulnerable people in Afghanistan, where 42% of the population was estimated to be acute food insecure at crisis or worse levels from November 2020 to March 2021. The Anticipatory Action Program sought to reduce the damage that will be incurred on the wheat harvest and livestock due to the dry conditions, which would further exacerbate the already challenging circumstance. But the big question remains, does this assistance have an impact in helping households protect their food security and livelihoods? So this is exactly what we're exploring. So together, FAO, Oxford University, and the Centre of Disaster Protection aiming to dive into these topics to assess what worked and critically what didn't in this scenario. We've collected survey data from over 2,600 beneficiary and control households in September 2021 and conducted a range of focus group discussions. These surveys and discussions aim to assess the impact of anticipatory action on food consumption and security of households up to 6 months after they received assistance. We use a regression discontinuity design where we compare households just above and below the vulnerability score. Households were deemed eligible if they scored above the vulnerability threshold measured before the program started. We define our control groups as those households located in the same villages that were just below the vulnerability threshold and thus not targeted due to limited budgeting. We also assess the effect of anticipatory action on household finance and coping strategies and whether interventions were socially inclusive. The activities were rolled out in different phases as additional donor funding came in as the crisis started to become more evident. We delivered the activities in some districts in April and the same activities again in June, and then after that in August in other districts. Although we do not have the right setup to look at the effect of timing of assistance in a rigorous manner, we can nevertheless explore the qualitatively. We observe larger effects in the districts that received the assistance earlier and what might have been driving those results. In addition to measuring the impact of anticipatory action on household welfare, a cost-benefit analysis of anticipatory actions will be conducted to evaluate the return of investment of the intervention. It will further explore how the return on investment differs between the different timings, so the April timing, the June, and the August. So within those different periods, was acting earlier or a little bit later seen as more beneficial. In addition, the study will critically ask two more questions. What are the key lessons we gathered about early warnings and what can be done better? Could we mobilize funding earlier, and do we need to change anything about the activities that were planned, delivered, and implemented? We will talk about a series of funding that came in, which resulted in the different timings for the interventions and what this meant in terms of the delivery of them. Did it become easier or harder to deliver the same activities later? Did procurement costs go up over time? Did the barriers go up due to the worsening of the drought, i.e. security? So we've got a lot to unpack, and the three of us, so FAO, Oxford University, and the Centre of Disaster Protection, are looking forward to releasing these results later in the year for you to see and understand how does anticipatory action work in Afghanistan, what have we managed to capture through our experience in 2020 and 2021, and most importantly, how can we take it forward to ensure that in the future we are acting in an anticipatory manner in Afghanistan to serve the vulnerable people within the country. Thank you very much for listening to our Ignite session.